Welcome to part 6 of the Empowered You series. I'm your instructor, Louise and Maurice, and it has been about 6 months since I've been inside the studio, and as most of you may or may not know, my mother was put into the hospital at the end of December 2018, and she never came out, and I was by her side, and very, very stressful. She went from the hospital to palliative care and then passed away in February of 2019. And from then, it was just so stressful. So lack of sleep, being at the hospital, 12, 14-hour days being by her side, it was something that I wouldn't want you to have to go through, but I want to share with you some things that do happen, because we're talking about the Empowered You Success Series, and obviously I have been on this journey and in this journey of empowerment and really wanting you to take back your power. And in this video, we're going to talk about those shame thoughts, and the fact that the shame thoughts come from those feelings and the fears. And in part number 5, we talked about the feeling of fraud, but in part number 4, we talked about that feeling of humiliation. And from that feeling of humiliation comes those shame thoughts. And as I was progressing with, working with my siblings and dealing with family members during this very stressful time, it's amazing how stress just completely, it hijacks your brain. And it doesn't matter how evolved you are and how further along, you have to be in that place of compassion and empathy when you're working with your clients. Because what your clients are experiencing as they want to build their business, as they want to lose weight, as they want to have that career of their dreams, life is happening. And sometimes they might be going through a divorce. They might be losing a spouse or someone who's very significant to them, as my mother was significant to me. And I watched as all of this was happening, because she was a very important person in a lot of people's lives, not just my life. And that stressful time, just grieving and going through all of that, really does hijack a lot of people's brains. And for myself, listening to the language that people were saying and all of the situations, not necessarily for shame, but for the other thoughts. The other thoughts that were going on. Now, I'll specifically talk about shame in the PDF document. Remember, I've got all of the questions and activities for you. You can just head on over to louiseandmaurice.com in the free resources section. But when we think about stress and how it hijacks the brain, it's hijacking the logical part of the brain, that conscious part. When people are awake, they're adults, they're going about their business, and they're not doing things in a logical way, as when someone's grieving, right? When they're going through that process of seeing someone they love just slowly die, that is extremely stressful. And then when they actually do, and then going through all of the different parts, putting the funeral mass together, going through their personal belongings and clearing all of that out, is just the most incredible stressful time for everyone that's involved. So that the logical part of the brain is gone. The prefrontal cortex shuts down and the automatic functions come in. The language and how they see themselves dealing with these situations. And for your clients, you want to be aware of what is happening underneath the surface, because this, right, that's already been programmed in them, conditioned their subconscious brain, the habits that have already been formed, how they go about doing things. You as the client, or you as the coach, you're looking at your client. who is taking over. And you're going to see all of these different pieces of the puzzle. And it really is something that you have to be aware, and you have to be aware of this process. And this is really what you are going to be dealing with. And it's the language that's going to be the clue, the language that they're using. And then you are then able to, as that curious bystander, ask those questions that bring them back and guide them in a way that's going to support them and empower them moving forward. Because shame thoughts will just keep them stuck in, I'm such a disappointment. Things that I've done are a disappointment. And as you're listening to people use that type of language, you know that if you help them to become more self-aware, if you bring them to a place where they're not in that place of shame anymore, and they can see in a logical way, then they can start moving forward and keying in on what is the stressful moment that's going on in their life right now that's taking them away and moving them in a place that doesn't support them. Now, as we move on with this series, we're going to talk about those habits that get formed from this loop. But it's helping your clients to be aware of that. Any questions, make sure you're reaching out in the Q&A area if you are in my Udemy courses. If not, just right below this video, and let's keep the conversation going. Again, I am your instructor, Louise and Maurice.